bread can use all of your talents, from physical dexterity to fine mental precision. Though challenging and time-consuming, creating the ideal product is very rewarding. The popularity of freshly baked, crusty bread has grown enormously in the last few years, and so has the demand for qualified bakers.
The phenomenon of people buying and consuming these crusty breads has increased by a double-digit rate of growth within like the last 5 years, because people are looking at crusty breads as an old world style bread, but it's very fresh and it's very simple.
In this program, Chef Richard Coppage will demonstrate the basic steps of making lean dough bread. Lean dough contains neither added fats nor other enriching agents. It is created from only a few ingredients, but it is an important building block for many bread products, including pan bread, dinner rolls, even pizza dough. And proving that simplicity is elegance, lean dough is also the heart of the traditional French loaf, the baguette.
It has a simple makeup of ingredients. It has its own unique taste and texture. And I think once a person learns to appreciate that simple taste and texture, they just buy the crusty products.
The method the chef will demonstrate is a technique used widely for mixing and using dough in one day. It's called the straight dough method, and like lean dough, it is an elemental building block for many types of bread. The chef will follow these 12 principal steps of bread baking to produce a variety of crusty lean dough breads: scaling, mixing, bulk fermentation, folding over, dividing, pre-shaping, bench rest, shaping, final fermentation, scoring, baking, and cooling. We will touch on the principles of baking behind the steps and show you some common pitfalls to avoid. We will discuss the properties of the ingredients and explain the tools and equipment you'll need. The steps are a guideline for producing baked bread. With each step, the baker makes choices. For instance, there are several mixing methods. Your choice could influence the action of the ingredients, the quality of the final product, even the schedule of production in your bake shop. By using the relatively straightforward straight dough mixing method, the bread can be produced in about 6 hours from start to finish. So to begin, the essential ingredients of lean bread dough are flour, water, yeast, and salt. Other doughs may call for sugar, eggs, fat, or other enriching agents. Flour is the backbone of our lean dough. There are dozens of types of flours and grain products, ground to different textures and combinations, or with flavorings added. For our demonstrations, we will work with hard winter wheat flour. It contains more high-quality protein. Soft wheat flour cakes when compressed. It is higher in starch, making it more suitable for cake-type products. For most yeast-raised breads, it is best to use hard winter wheat with good gluten quality.
Gluten is a wheat protein substance that's formed when you add water to wheat flour. And as you mix, for example, you are bonding the various gluten components and they tighten. And this chain forms, and as it gets tighter, it develops the elasticity and the ability for the dough to stretch.
This tight web traps the gases created as the dough rises. We will use unbleached flour because bleaching alters the taste of the flour and gets rid of the carotene pigment contained within it. Some bakers prefer bleached flour because bleaching matures the flour and gives it a good baking quality. Bromated flours have a chemical additive which adds volume to the bread. There are some serious health concerns about this additive, so we will use unbromated flour. Bakers should be aware of any of their state's regulations concerning the use of bromated flours. Water is the ingredient which hydrates the flour. Use good potable water which is not highly chlorinated. Chemicals can easily alter yeast activity. Yeast leavens the bread, that is, makes it rise. Commercial yeast comes in many forms. The most common are active dry, instant, and fresh yeast. With yeast, it is crucial to follow the manufacturer's instructions. For our demonstration, we will use fresh yeast. Yeast is a living organism. As shown in this sample, it consumes the starch in the flour, and through a series of reactions called fermentation, it produces the gas which leavens the bread. Salt flavors the bread, but it also controls the yeast growth. Without salt, dough rises too fast. Once you are familiar with the properties of the basic ingredients, you will learn how even the slightest variation can affect the finished bread. It is much better to start with the correct amount of each ingredient than to try to fix mistakes. When baking, follow the precise formula that has been developed to work well in the conditions of your bake shop. Bakers conceptualize their formulas in percentages. In fact, the expression of a formula in percentages is referred to as the baker's percentage. With this method, the base ingredient, flour, is always labeled 100%. The other ingredients are expressed as a percentage relative to the total amount of flour, which again is always labeled 100%. In Chef Coppage's formula, you can see that the amount of each of the other ingredients is a percentage relative to the total flour weight. For example, the water will always weigh 65% of what the flour weighs. When all the ingredients are mixed together, they'll weigh 168.5% of the original flour weight. Bakers use the percentage formula to calculate the correct amount of each ingredient as they increase or decrease the dough yield. If they want a greater yield, they'll first increase the amount of flour, then they'll mathematically apply the percentages indicated in the formula, and the amounts of the other ingredients will increase proportionally. The weight of each ingredient may change, but the percentage in relation to the total flour weight remains the same. We'll show this lean dough formula again at the end of the program and review how to increase or decrease the yield. So, let's make loaves. The first of the 12 steps is to weigh the ingredients on a scale to the specifications of your bread formula. There are various types of scales. This is a common balance beam scale. A counterweight is used to offset the weight of the container. Additional weights reflect the weight of the ingredient. This is a spring scale. You must zero out the scale, or subtract the weight of the container to get an accurate reading of the weight of your ingredient. Chef Coppage uses a digital scale for our demonstration. He immediately cancels out the weight of the container by putting the dial at 0. First, the water. In general, when baking, it is easier and more accurate to measure by weight instead of by volume. Then, the fresh yeast. And flour, the ingredient that forms most of the dough. Notice the care taken to measure with accuracy. Now salt, a small amount, but still important for flavor and to control the growth of the yeast. Once you have weighed all the ingredients, then you mix them. Bakers have a wide choice of mixers: oblique, spiral, huge industrial machines, or small home mixers. Of course, mixing by hand is the best way to learn how the dough actually develops.
In fact, in France, a lot of bakers, as part of their apprenticeship, to master their knowledge, they have to mix a large batch of dough by hand and then fabricate the entire product, all by hand.
In our demonstration, we are using the straight dough mixing method. This means that all of the ingredients are mixed together from scratch, without using any previously fermented dough as an ingredient. Although doughs which ferment for a longer time often have the best taste, the straight dough method gives you an excellent bread in a comparatively short work time, start to finish. There are 4 stages of the mixing process: the pickup stage, the cleanup stage, the development stage, and the final stage. Good mixing will produce a smooth dough in which all the ingredients are thoroughly incorporated. Also, at the end of the mixing, the dough should be roughly room temperature. Therefore, at the beginning of the mixing, the water should be at a temperature to help you achieve the desired dough temperature. The final dough temperature is important because a higher dough temperature will increase the rate of fermentation. A lower temperature will do the opposite. The rate of fermentation strongly affects the characteristics and flavor of the bread. In baker's language, the desired dough temperature is determined by taking into account the total temperature factor. The factor incorporates the temperatures of 3 different elements in the bake shop: room temperature, flour temperature, and mixer friction. That is, the warming of the dough produced by mixing. The room temperature and the flour temperature can be measured easily with a thermometer. Harder to measure is the heat created within the dough by the action of mixing. All mixers produce friction which warms the dough, but each mixer produces it to a different degree. Therefore, your calculation cannot be entirely accurate until you learn to gauge the effect of the mixer you use. At the end of this program, we will show you how to figure out the friction factor for your mixer. Of all the variables the baker can influence in order to attain the desired dough temperature, the easiest element to change is the water temperature. Chef Coppage wants a final dough temperature of 75 degrees Fahrenheit. The bake shop is 70 degrees. The flour is 68 degrees. From experience, he knows that his mixer produces a friction factor of 24 degrees Fahrenheit. He calculates that a water temperature of about 63 degrees Fahrenheit will help him to reach the desired dough temperature of about 75 degrees. Now for the fresh yeast. For efficiency, break up the yeast chunks by hand and mix them with the water. The flour is added to the water and yeast. Because salt instantly affects the action of the yeast, it is best to add it last. Ordinarily, mixers do not operate unless the guard is down, but we have adjusted this one for demonstration purposes. In the first stage, called pickup, the mixing begins on low speed. The ingredients need to slowly come together and form a bond. We are using a spiral mixer. Good mixing is not just for combining ingredients, it distributes the ingredients evenly and develops the gluten.
It doesn't matter the type of mixer, but you have to learn to look at the way things are coming together during that mixing.
The water picks up the flour the water, and the dough begins to collect on the hook. In the cleanup stage, the mixing bowl appears to be getting clean, as if the hook was a magnet picking up dough. This also takes place at low speed. Here you are achieving uniform incorporation of the ingredients.
Well, a baker has to learn to adjust to the humidity level that's in the air, because the dough can take on that humidity, be absorbed by the flour, and you end up with a dough that's too sticky.
The pickup and cleanup stages last a total of about 3 minutes on low speed. The development and final stages last a total of 3 to 4 minutes on high speed. Gluten is the protein substance which gives the dough structure, elasticity, and tenacity, the ability to hold gases. At this point, the dough should pull away from the bowl more readily. At the development stage, the gluten is strengthening. Toward the end of the mixing process, the dough develops a stretchable quality called extensibility. Look for a lighter color and a smooth, silky texture. You might even hear a popping sound as more air is incorporated. Be extremely careful when mixing. Don't operate your mixer until you've read the instructions. By the final stage, the dough is a uniform mixture with good gluten development and the right amount of extensibility and elasticity. If the initial water temperature was properly calculated, the dough will have reached the desired temperature. This batch is 75 degrees, just as planned.
You have to listen, look, touch, feel, stretch the dough out.
Properly mixing the ingredients will permit the proper fermentation and development of the dough. An undermixed dough will look like this. The dough is inelastic and dry, and it gives way a lot sooner than it should. The gluten is underdeveloped.
Using a spiral mixer can save you a lot of time and monies because it mixes the dough very quickly, but you have to also be on the lookout for mixing too long, which can sometimes be an extra 30 seconds, because it's going to work so quickly it's going to break your gluten structure down.
An overmixed dough will look like this. The dough is very sticky and too extensible or stretchy. It breaks down because the gluten is overdeveloped. Overmixing causes the dough to lose flavor because of excessive oxidation. This adverse chemical reaction takes place when too much air is incorporated into the dough during mixing. This dough sample is mixed correctly. The next step is bulk fermentation. You'll need a tub or bowl and a cover or plastic wrap. The aim of bulk fermentation is to give the dough volume and a porous structure. It also adds flavor.
During fermentation, we want the dough to expand. And as it's trying to expand, we don't want any crust formation which can restrict the movement of the dough. So we keep it covered with a plastic cover or, in some cases, a cloth. If it's in a proof box where it's warm and humid, then it does not need to be covered because that's going to give it that extra humidity on the surface.
The living yeast starts to digest carbohydrates within the flour and produces carbon dioxide as a result. Enzymes in the flour break the starches into simple sugars. This simple form of carbohydrate becomes the available food source for the yeast. Fermentation also produces alcohol, which evaporates completely in the heat of baking.
But basically with the yeast, when it's finished, what you get in the end are these waste products, which make the dough rise, which makes the dough have the porous structure. It makes it more tender. It makes it more flavorful. It makes it easier to handle.
The gluten is strengthened during bulk fermentation, gaining more of the elastic and silky qualities that started to form during the mixing. In a way, gluten is the counterpart of yeast. It creates a resistant web which contains the gases produced by the yeast. You can see in this time-lapse demonstration of bulk fermentation just how much volume the dough achieves.
When you're making bread, your product is alive from approximately 20 minutes after mixing until the time you start to bake that product. So fermentation is very critical. As one baker in the past has told me, a yeast dough waits for no one. And when it's ready, you have to be ready, or else it's going to leave you behind.
A young dough means the dough is under-fermented. This dough has fermented too long. It is too old to use. With experience, you will learn how to balance the relationship between gluten and yeast.
If you let one go more than the other, for example, with too much fermentation, then you have a bread that has too much of an alcoholic aroma.
The formula we are using calls for 2 hours of bulk fermentation. About halfway through bulk fermentation, the dough is folded over. Some bakers refer to it as punching or knocking back, but it requires a gentler touch than either of those imply. The yeast has been doing its job, creating air pockets within the dough which leavens the bread. Folding over boosts the process by redistributing the yeast's source of food, expelling carbon dioxide, equalizing the temperature throughout the dough, and developing the gluten strands. Press down on the dough piece with 2 hands and then fold it in thirds as if you were wrapping a package. With different mixing methods or fermentation methods, the dough's performance may improve with more than one folding over during the bulk fermentation. After folding over, rest the dough for the duration of the bulk fermentation. This batch will rest about 60 minutes. Then it will be ready for the next step, dividing. Now you have a good workable dough to divide into the pieces which will eventually become baked goods. Dividing the dough requires a scale because weighing with precision is all important with this step. Here we'll use the balance beam scale to measure out the pieces of dough to their pre-bake weight. These 12-ounce dough pieces will be used for baguettes. About 10% of the weight will be lost through evaporation during the baking process. These round loaves are divided into 1-pound pieces. Fermentation is going on even as you divide the dough. Each time you cut, gas is released. So working quickly, efficiently, and in order is essential. This is an efficient way of scaling the dough for 36 dinner rolls, for example. First, cut one piece weighing about 5 pounds. Using a plate designed for this purpose, place the dough piece into the mechanical dividing machine. Each dough piece weighs 2 1/4 ounces. Division accomplished. Pre-shaping is for loosely molding the dough into a form that roughly resembles the final shape. Round for the round loaves, oblong for the baguettes, and so on. Rest them on the bench in an orderly fashion. You are getting the pieces ready for the next phase of fermentation, called bench rest. Bulk fermentation and pre-shaping stretched and aligned the gluten. The strands of protein now literally have to relax again before the final shaping can take place. It takes about 15 minutes of bench rest for the dough to recover. The dough is covered with cloth or plastic to protect the surface from drying out.
You don't want your dough to form an elephant skin, because if the dough forms a skin that looks kind of like an elephant skin where it's very dry and cracked, you can't tell what's happening underneath that skin.
When the dough feels softer, it is ready for shaping. Molding a piece of dough by hand is where the skills of the baker really come to the fore. This is where you can conform to the traditional shapes or experiment. The traditional round loaves should be smooth and spherical with tight seams. They are placed in baskets which preserve their shapes during the next phase of fermentation. To shape a baguette, flatten the dough to degas it a bit, but don't handle it